The sound of a coffee cup being placed too firmly on the counter broke the silence in Jake's kitchen. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows across the oak table where his phone rested. The image on its screen burned into his memory. A candid group photo from last night's party. Anna, his wife of 12 years, stood too close to Tom, her co-worker. She'd seen him late into the night topping off his phone, and some moments later, her face popped up. A hand, partially hidden, rested lightly on his arm, and the way they leaned into each other, oblivious to the world, spoke volumes. Jake stared at the image, his chest tightening. Sophie, Anna's best friend, had texted it to him late at night, a seemingly innocent gesture. "Looks like everyone had a blast," the caption read, cheerful and careless. But Jake's keen eye picked up on the subtle betrayals lurking beneath the surface. Years of building a life with Anna had taught him her tells, her genuine laughter, her forced specials, and the ones she saved for someone special. This wasn't for him. Anna was in the shower upstairs, her voice faintly humming through the closed door. Jake's mind raced, piecing together the moments he had overlooked. The late nights at work, the girls' trips that always seemed to extend by a day, and the way she had stopped laughing at his jokes, the way she used to. It was all there, but until now, he hadn't wanted to see it. He picked up the phone again and zoomed in on the photo. There was no denying the chemistry. Her smile wasn't the kind she gave to strangers or even friends. It was reserved, intimate. A wave of nausea hit him as the puzzle pieces started to click into place. He thought of her text from the previous night. "Late meeting, don't wait up." He had emailed Prera several times to ask after her. Jake's heart sank further. Last night's meeting wasn't with clients or co-workers, it was with him. Tom. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. Jake paced the kitchen, his hazel eyes dark with determination. His first instinct was to confront her immediately, to barge into the bathroom and demand answers. But then he stopped. His hands tightened into fists at his sides as he forced himself to breathe. Confrontation without preparation wouldn't just be messy, it would give her a chance to deny, to twist the truth, and to leave him with more questions than answers. He needed proof, not just for himself, but to ensure she couldn't wriggle free with excuses or half-truths. Jake walked to the coat rack, grabbed his jacket and slipped his phone into the pocket. He had an idea where Anna kept her work planner. Her meticulous nature meant she logged everything. He'd look there first. As he reached the doorway of their shared office, a new wave of pain coursed through him. This was the same space where they had once spent nights planning vacations, dreaming of the future. Now it felt like enemy territory, with every file and drawer potentially hiding evidence of her betrayal. All that hadn't already been destroyed. Jake opened the desk drawers slowly, his pulse pounding in his ears. Jake sat in the dim light of the office, Anna's planner open before him. Her neat handwriting filled the pages, with color-coded appointments for work, brunches with friends, and gym sessions. Yet, his observant nature zeroed in on patterns, certain meetings coinciding with evenings when she returned home late, flushed and vague in her explanations. One entry, written in bright green ink, caught his eye. "Dinner with Sophie, 7 p.m. He recalled that night clearly. Anna had come home past midnight, claiming Sophie's emotional breakdown had led to a marathon heart-to-heart. He remembered thinking it odd that Sophie had seemed perfectly cheerful when they spoke the next day. Now Jake wondered if Sophie had even been involved at all. He flipped further back in the planner. Similar entries appeared, innocuous excuses that aligned suspiciously with nights when she was unusually distant afterward. His pulse quickened. The deception wasn't sloppy, but it wasn't foolproof. Jake's phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. A message from Emma, his younger sister, popped up. "Hey, big brother. Still coming over later? Call me if you need to vent. Love you." He smiled faintly. Emma had always been his rock. He hadn't told her the full extent of his suspicions, but her instincts were sharp, and she'd sensed something was wrong. He hesitated, then typed back a quick reply. "I'll call you soon. Need your perspective." Jake looked back at the planner and noticed something else. Addresses. One scribbled under a date last month wasn't a familiar restaurant or gym. He opened his phone and typed the address into a map. It was a townhouse on the other side of town. Not a venue, not a workplace, a residence. The pit in his stomach deepened as another memory surfaced. Anna's insistence on picking up their son's soccer gear that night instead of letting Jake handle it. "You're always so busy. Let me take care of it," she had said. Now he wondered if that trip had been more about detouring to the townhouse. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Anna moving upstairs. He quickly returned the planner to the drawer, closing it gently, his heart racing. He didn't have enough yet. Confronting her now would lead to denial, evasion. He needed clarity. Anna descended the stairs, her damp blonde hair framing her face. She smiled, her disarming charm on full display. "You're up early," she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Couldn't sleep," Jake replied, his tone even, though every fiber of his being urged him to demand the truth. Instead, he forced a smile. "What's your plan for the day?" Anna hesitated, just for a moment. "Oh, Sophie and I are going to the spa. Then errands." Jake nodded, keeping his expression neutral. Her lies were starting to show cracks, but he needed patience. "Sounds nice. Don't overdo it." As Anna left the house a short while later, Jake waited until her car disappeared down the street. Then, grabbing his phone and keys, he headed out himself toward the townhouse address from the planner. If answers lay there, he was ready to find them. This was no longer just suspicion. It was a battle for the truth, and Jake wouldn't stop until he had it. Jake parked a block away from the townhouse, his heart pounding in his chest. The address from Anna's planner led him to a quiet tree-lined street with identical townhouses. It was unassuming, ordinary, a place you'd never expect to be at the center of a betrayal. "So, Anna has stayed in touch." He checked his watch. If Anna's timeline held, she'd be at the spa with Sophie for hours. There was time, but not much. Jake had spent the drive rehearsing excuses in case anyone saw him. Perhaps he'd claimed to be lost or looking for a friend. But as he approached the townhouse, the street remained eerily quiet. The curtains in most windows drawn, the number matched. 217 Maple Lane. Jake stood on the porch, hesitating for a moment before leaning closer to examine the window. His sharp hazel eyes picked up details. A stack of unopened mail on a side table, a wine glass left on the counter. Signs of someone living there regularly. As he circled the house, he noticed a back gate leading to a small garden. The latch clicked open without resistance. He moved carefully, feeling both out of place and determined to uncover the truth. The sliding glass door at the back offered a clearer view of the interior. A jacket draped over a chair was unmistakably Anna's, a tailored piece he had bought her for their anniversary 2 years ago. Seeing it here in a stranger's home felt like a punch to the gut. Jake retrieved his phone and snapped a few photos. His mind raced. Was this Tom's place? Did Anna and he meet here? The possibilities swirled in his head like a storm. Suddenly his train of thought was interrupted by the sound of a car engine. Jake ducked behind the garden fence, peering through a crack in the wood. A sleek black sedan pulled into the driveway, and his breath caught as Tom stepped out, carrying a grocery bag. Tom unlocked the front door and disappeared inside. Minutes later, the sliding glass door opened, and Jake caught snippets of a phone conversation. "Yeah, she'll be here later. No, Sophie doesn't know the whole story yet. Relax, Anna's handling it." The name hit Jake like a thunderclap. Not just confirmation of Anna's involvement, but also Sophie's complicity. His world felt like it was collapsing under the weight of deceit. When Tom ended the call and retreated indoors, Jake's resolve solidified. He couldn't barge in. Not yet. His presence would alert them and give Anna time to fabricate a defense. Instead, he crept away from the garden, heart hammering, determined to return later under different circumstances. As he walked back to his car, Jake considered his next move. The truth was no longer just a suspicion or vague theory. He now had tangible evidence of her lies, the threads of a larger conspiracy, beginning to unravel. Sitting behind the wheel, Jake dialed Emma's number. His sister answered on the second ring, her voice steady. "Jake? What's going on?" "I need your help," he said, his voice firm. "And I need you to keep this between us." Whatever came next, Jake knew he couldn't face it alone. With Emma's support, he could expose Anna and Tom, leaving no doubt as to the depth of their betrayal. The time for doubts had passed. The battle for truth was just beginning. Jake sat in his sister Emma's cozy living room, the air thick with tension. Across from him, Emma clutched her coffee mug, her face a mixture of anger and concern as Jake recounted everything. Anna's suspicious behavior, the townhouse, and Tom's phone call. "So Sophie knows?" Emma asked, her voice laced with disbelief. "She's covering for Anna?" Jake nodded, his jaw tight. "It's not just her. Tom's involved, and God knows who else. This goes deeper than I thought." Emma leaned forward, her hazel eyes narrowing. "Jake, you need to confront this head on. But if you're going to do it, you need to have everything, every piece of evidence. That way, there's no room for her to weasel out of it." She turned to Jake and smiled. Jake agreed, though a knot of dread tightened in his chest. He had always prided himself on his calm, calculated nature, but now it felt like he was walking a tightrope, teetering between anger and heartbreak. "Tom mentioned Sophie didn't know the full story," Jake said, recalling the phone call he overheard. "That means Anna's been feeding her half-truths, maybe using her to cover her tracks." Emma's expression darkened. "That poor girl doesn't realize what she's wrapped up in. Anna's manipulative, always has been. But Sophie, she might come around if you approach her the right way." They strategized late into the evening. Jake planned to gather more concrete evidence before confronting Anna. Emma suggested hiring a private investigator, someone who could provide undeniable proof of the affair. Jake hesitated at first, but Emma insisted. "If you go in unprepared, she'll twist this around and make you the villain. You know she's good at that." The next day, Jake contacted a discreet private investigator named Daniel. The man came highly recommended and had years of experience uncovering hidden truths. Over the phone, Jake explained the situation, leaving no detail untouched. Daniel was confident. "I'll follow her movements and gather what you need. If there's something going on, we'll find it." Meanwhile, Jake focused on Sophie. That evening, when she came over for dinner, Jake subtly steered the conversation toward Anna. He watched closely as Sophie responded, hesitant at first, her eyes darting nervously. "Sophie," Jake said gently, "I know there's more to this than you're letting on. I'm not angry at you. I just need the truth." Her eyes welled up with tears, but she didn't speak. Jake's heart ached. He didn't want to put her in a difficult position, but he couldn't ignore her involvement either. Emma joined them, her tone softer than usual. "Sophie, we're not here to blame you. We just want to understand. Sometimes the truth feels scary, but it's the only way to move forward." The speaker shuddered, and her head tilted to the side, the terrification of the truth. Finally, Sophie broke down. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Uncle Jake. Anna told me. She said you'd overreact if you knew the truth." "What truth?" Jake pressed, his voice calm but firm. Sophie hesitated, then whispered, "She's been seeing Tom for a while. But she promised it wasn't serious. She said it didn't change how she felt about you." Jake's chest tightened, but he nodded, keeping his composure. "Thank you, Sophie," he said quietly. "That means a lot to me." Later that night, Jake received a call from Daniel. "We've got something," the investigator said. "You might want to sit down for this." Jake's stomach sank. Whatever Daniel had uncovered, it would confirm everything he feared and leave no room for denial. The moment of reckoning was approaching. Jake sat alone in his car outside the townhouse. The evening air was crisp, and the distant hum of passing traffic filled the silence. In his hands was a folder, thick with the evidence Daniel had gathered: photographs of Anna and Tom, text message exchanges, financial records showing unexplained expenses, and even footage of them entering the townhouse together on multiple occasions. Each piece of evidence was another weight pressing on Jake's chest, but it was the irrefutable proof he needed. Inside the house, Anna and Tom were unaware of the storm brewing outside. The blinds were drawn and faint laughter filtered through the walls. Jake took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he was about to do. He grabbed the folder, stepped out of the car, and walked to the front door. He rang the bell and waited. Moments later, the door opened, and Tom's face froze in shock. "Jake," Tom stammered, his eyes darting behind him. What are you doing here?" Jake didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pushed past Tom and stepped into the house, his presence commanding the room. Anna appeared in the doorway of the living room, her face going pale the moment she saw him. "Jake," she started, her voice trembling. "I can explain." "Don't," Jake interrupted, his tone sharp but controlled. He tossed the folder onto the coffee table, its contents spilling out. "Explain that." Anna's eyes flicked to the evidence, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled for words. Tom stepped forward, his hands raised as if to calm the situation. "Jake, listen," Tom began. "I know this looks bad, but you think this is about how it looks." Jake's voice rose, his calm facade cracking. "It's about what it is. The lies. The betrayal. The utter disrespect." Anna's composure broke. "Jake, I never meant to hurt you," she said, her voice desperate. "I swear, it wasn't supposed to go this far." Jake shook his head, his hazel eyes piercing through her excuses. "You didn't mean to hurt me. Every time you lied, every time you came home pretending nothing was wrong, you made a choice. And now you'll face the consequences." Tom, visibly uncomfortable, stepped back. "Maybe I should go." "No," Jake snapped, his gaze fixed on Anna. "He stays. He's as much a part of this as you are." The room fell silent, the weight of Jake's anger suffocating. Anna's hands trembled as she reached for him. "Please, Jake. I've made a mistake, but I love you. I don't want to lose you." Jake stepped back, avoiding her touch. "You lost me the moment you decided to betray me." Without another word, Jake turned and walked out. The door slammed behind him, the sound reverberating through the house like a final verdict. In the following weeks, Jake moved swiftly. With Emma's help, he filed for divorce, securing his assets and ensuring Anna couldn't manipulate the process. He leaned on his sister and close friends, finding strength in their unwavering support. Anna, on the other hand, faced the fallout of her actions. Sophie, horrified by the full truth, distanced herself from her former best friend. Tom, exposed for his role, was ostracized by their social circle. For Jake, the path forward wasn't easy, but it was clear. He began to rebuild his life, piece by piece, focusing on his work, his family, and himself. The betrayal had left scars, but it also taught him his own resilience. One evening, as he stood on the balcony of his new apartment overlooking the city, Jake felt a strange sense of peace. The storm had passed, and though the wounds were fresh, he knew he was free. Free to start again. Free to find happiness on his own terms.